And hello and welcome to a wonderful panel discussion that is about what's happening with education in our community. And we're talking with the folks from Mind Trust and their associates. And it's going to be one of those conversations that you want to pay close attention to. Why? Because there are e-learning education sites that are available that will take care of really getting rid of the learning gap that's going on. So let me welcome in some of the folks that are going to be on part of the panel. Shannon Williams, who is the Senior Vice President of Community Engagement with Mind Trust. Also, Ontay Johnson, who is the Executive Director of Empowered Families. Also, Morrise Harbour, who is the Founder Executive Director of Liberty Grove Schools. Kareema Boykin, LCSW, and Treasure Jones, who is an educator teacher with Matchbook Learning. Welcome. How you guys doing?
Good.
Hello.
Good.
Great.
So, community learning sites, we're going to talk about those community learning sites, but I want to start this off because we're all in the education game. A lot of folks don't know, but on the other side of my career, I'm now an educator in public schools. So I teach radio and television. And so I can empathize, sympathize, and understand why the Mind Trust and the community learning centers and the e-learning community centers are very, very important. But how are you feeling about what we're facing right now? Because the circumstances that we're going through have really challenged so many. It's challenged not only the educators, the administration, but it's challenged the families, it's challenged the students, and as a community overall, it's affecting everyone. So anybody can jump in, because I want to start the conversation about how you feel in this process.
I'll start.
Okay, thank you, Shannon. Go ahead.
Sure. Just full transparency. I was sharing with some folks earlier today. Like, I'm really struggling in a lot of ways. It's very challenging, to go through something like this pandemic, but also to maintain, your regular life. So we all still have to work as normal, and we, have to do things as normal as we can. But life as we know it is different and has been different for a number of months. So recently I had some deaths in my family. And so it's just, it's been very difficult, for me to like balance professionally and then my emotions and the grieving and things of that nature. But I feel like everything that I'm going through, it's not uncommon, unfortunately. A lot of folks are experiencing the same things. They've lost loved ones to this pandemic. They've lost loved ones for other reasons, as is the case with my family. But yeah, it's very difficult to navigate this world that we've been in for several months and still maintain normal aspects of life, like being parents and spouses and employees and doing all of those things in a great and exemplary way.
Yeah, well, our condolences and prayers going out to you for your losses, most definitely.
Appreciate it. Thank you.
Anyone else?
Yeah, I'll chime in and just say, like Shannon, it's just been a very trying time, so to speak. Just being able to, I've just transitioned to Indianapolis 5 months ago. So being able to, or having the obstacles in the way of transitioning from one state, Washington, D.C. to another, just that in and of itself was difficult. From a professional standpoint, from an educational standpoint, I'm concerned, but at the same time, I'm also optimistic because I know that the educators throughout the country are resilient and they're finding ways to ensure that students don't miss a beat in terms of their learning through, these community learning sites that are taking place throughout.
Most definitely, and I appreciate you sharing that. So let's get into the learning process now that's going on as we talk about closing the e-learning education gap with community learning sites, and there are quite a few community learning sites that we will go into and talk about. But let me ask whomever wants to answer this question. Tell us about the community learning sites and how they came about, because these community learning sites are fantastic and they are where they need to be.
Right. Sure. I'll jump in. So when IPS announced in late July, early August that schools would go all virtual, the Mind Trust knew that that was going to be a challenge. We understood the importance of schools going virtual, and because naturally the safety of children is utmost concern, but we also knew that that would be incredibly challenging for the families within the IPS district. And, we support a lot of charter schools. Many of those families, unfortunately, do not have the luxury of working from home. They don't have a lot of PTO where they can just take off. And, unfortunately, if they don't go to work, they don't get paid. Therefore, the basic needs of their families aren't going to be met. And so we knew that we had to come up with a solution, and we felt a real urgency about this. And so we said, what would be most convenient, because we actually did a survey a couple of months prior, during the summer, actually, to find out kind of what parents wanted to do, like when school started and what would be the best options for them. And the survey showed that parents overwhelmingly wanted an in-person option, even if it wasn't in the traditional school setting. And so the Mind Trust, we reached out to various community partners. Those partners consist of community centers, churches, neighborhood organizations, and just asked them, we were able to provide you some comprehensive support and some back-end support, as well as funding for you. We were able to do all of this. Would you be able to host students and provide them with comprehensive support? And overwhelmingly, our community partners said yes. And so that's how the community learning sites were launched. They're located strategically throughout central Indianapolis, and we have multiple partners. We initially started out with 11 community learning sites in August. Now we are at about 27 community learning sites. So just really proud of the fact that the Mind Trust was able to be so innovative, but also that our community partners were willing to jump on board and fill in the gap that was needed to best serve families.
Shannon, let me ask you, because when you talk about 27 sites, two things. Is there an age limit? And is this free? Because when you talk about doing something, particularly in this day and age with what's going on, services being provided for nothing or a minimal cost is important. So could you answer that question for those families that are watching?
Sure. We wanted things to be as simple as possible for families. We did not want to put another burden on families who were already experiencing layers of burdens and inconveniences. So the sites are completely free. The students receive 2 meals a day. They have access to really great technology support to help them log on to their classes. The sites are also very innovative with the enrichment activities they provide to students. And so, yeah, completely free. It's open to all students. Overwhelmingly, most of the students that our community learning sites serve are IPS students, but we do have students from other townships that also participate in the sites.
Now, we know as educators and folks in our community, statistics are showing that this virtual learning scenario has impacted Brown and Black families more consequently. So talk a little bit about that. How has it impacted? What are you seeing, and what is being done to address this?
Sure, I'll jump on this, but I certainly welcome Morrise and Treasure and anyone else to speak as well. So I read a quote, and I'm paraphrasing. I read a tweet today that said, Black people have essentially been at a disadvantage since slavery. We've been at a disadvantage, in so many ways, and whites have had the privilege of having access to great schools and great healthcare since it seems like forever ago. And so we know even prior to the pandemic that Black and Brown children were suffering and were behind academically in a lot of ways compared to their white counterparts. There have been several studies that have occurred during the pandemic, and that learning loss is still significant within Black and Brown communities and even low-income communities. So for instance, over the last several months, Black students in particular have experienced a loss equivalent to 10 months of school. Latino students have experienced a loss equivalent to about 9 months of school. And then when you layer on that, low-income students in general, and that includes white low-income students, have experienced learning loss of about a year. So the loss has been tremendous, which is why these community learning sites are so important. We want to do whatever we could to help kind of fill in the gap of loss that that's been present since we've, come on this land, but also certainly enhanced even more so once the pandemic started.
Anybody else can add to that, or if you can answer the question, what type of results have you seen because of the community learning sites?
Well, I can go ahead and piggyback off of Shannon. I'm a third grade teacher at Magic Learning, and we haven't shut down. We got a waiver from the state saying that we could stay open 100%. However, our students and our families have the option of going staying virtual or going in person. So for my particular class, it's about split. I still have many of my students of a class of 30 that are staying virtual. And before, when we were all virtual, it's very difficult. Just the technology piece for third graders alone is super difficult. Being able to manipulate the tools that enhance learning, like some of the platforms, especially Zoom and quizzes and all those things, they're great. But if you don't know how to work them, or if the slightest error happens on the computer, being able to navigate that is pretty difficult for them. And I serve a school with a large Spanish-speaking population, and so there's just a lot of different difficulties that come with students and families having to navigate through all of those different barriers, then start the education. And so I do have some ideas of how we can enhance, bring some closure to some of those different barriers, but it's going to take a lot of effort on everybody's behalf.
And that's really interesting in the context when you talk about what is happening. You've got the waivers, so it's still affecting the students the way it is. So to have a community organization where you get an opportunity to have these community learning centers in place, they will enhance what's going on. So you can leave one place and go to another and really get some additional help. So that's definitely something that's very, very important. Anybody else want to add something to that?
I was just thinking when Treasure mentioned the technology piece. So I have a 7th grader and a 2nd grader, and I agree. I mean, I know the basics of technology. I know how to work my computer and do the things that I need to do, but just having my kids at home and working from home full time was very difficult and frustrating to me, of like how, making sure they got on and making sure my 2nd grader was where he needed to be at certain times. And so it was very stressful. And so to have these learning centers was very helpful to me. And it has truly been a blessing.
Oh, that's great. And when you think about it, and if you're just joining us, we're talking about closing the e-learning education gap, and we're here with the Mind Trust with community learning sites, and we're talking about those community learning sites and how important they are. And when you really talk about the technology, and especially when you're talking about elementary students, younger students, and the parents having maybe 2 or 3 children, you're faced with a major challenge in many instances, because you have to sign on at the same time. You've got to make sure that the lesson plans are being followed and all those things. And as much as we want to think that, young people are extremely technology savvy, there's still challenges out there. What kind of things are you seeing that families are dealing with in this pandemic that we're dealing with concerning these centers, but also overall? What kind of things are we seeing?
Yeah, from the perspective of families, our families are and this is what they've been sharing with us at Empowered Families, is some of them are just lost for what to do in this moment. They're bombarded with, work or lack thereof. They're bombarded with, in some cases, we talk about this digital divide, but in some instances, there have been challenges with even having the technology to work in this space to help their children. So parents are dealing with a lot. There's stress They don't have the resources that they need to mitigate all of the challenges that are coming at them on a daily basis. And then we think about grandparents that are working with their grandchildren. And, you know, if you know grandparents like I do, I love my grandparents dearly, but them being able to help their grandchildren navigate through technology, that's a challenge in and of itself. And so there are a lot of challenges that our parents are experiencing. But I will say that our parents, they're resilient. No, they've never been through a pandemic, but they have been through hard times before. And so that mindset has helped them to fight through the challenge of this year. They're still hopeful for tomorrow. And I'm just excited to be a part of what they're doing, what they're saying, and the ability to see a brighter tomorrow. 2021 is almost here. But I'll also say that let's not lose sight of what we need to be understanding and doing in this moment. I've heard a lot of people say, man, I can't wait till 2020 is over. That may be true, but what are you supposed to be learning in this moment that will catapult you or help you into 2021?
Tony, just to add to that, I think one of the things that I'm seeing is centered around the relationship between the teacher and the parents. It's actually becoming more improved as a result of this e-learning concept that's going around. You have an opportunity where I can now see firsthand, like, this is what my child is learning. This is where my child may have some deficiencies. And I can now, interact with the teacher a little bit more real time to see how I can support that child, especially in those elementary grade levels.
Right.
You know, I'm glad you said that, and I want to talk to our educators too. This has really put you in a position, and being one, I know this. It's put you in a position to find out who the advocates are for their children's learning. And so talk about that a little bit, because the one thing that I'm really surprised at is this has given us an opportunity to find out, and as much as I'm going to be straight up, who cares and who doesn't care. It's
absolutely
given us an opportunity to see who is advocating for their child's education and what deficiencies are there, and what, as educators and administrators and Mind Trust can do to help change that circumstance. So talk about that a little bit.
So I'm going to go ahead and touch on that just a little bit, because when you're in training or in class to become a teacher, they talk to you about how important parent relationships are. But nothing has shown the importance of parent relationships and just frequent contact like this pandemic. And it's important to stay in constant communication, but at the end of the day, like when you're in my classroom or in any classroom, it should be this way, but we're a team regardless of schedules, regardless of what's going on. We have to be a team, because the only way that the student is going to succeed is with both of us working together. So the parents and the teacher, because they're the lifelong advocates of their students' learning. And so when it's interesting, because I do my very best to not make it seem like an option. So if I'm on Zoom and I know that I assigned 7 different assignments this week, and you haven't done any of them. Now, there may be an actual issue that, like, you maybe don't know how to do them, or maybe you don't know how to navigate the website or whatever. But on Zoom, when we log on, I need mom to come to the camera so she can see how serious and how devoted I am to this student. So we can make sure that not only does that student know how to navigate, but mom does too, or whatever guardian is there too. And so that's why it's important to me to enable the advocates, right? So we need to enable the parents or the guardians or the daycare, wherever that child is staying for that period of time, to be the best advocate or to be the best support team for that student at that time, because it is almost impossible to get your students logged on and get your curriculum across, teach without their support. It is impossible.
Yeah.
Agreed.
Yeah, absolutely. So I want to make sure that we let our viewers know how they can find out about the community learning site. So let's go ahead and get that information out there as quickly as we can so that folks can, as they're listening and watching, they can click on and see some of the things. So let's go ahead and get that information out there.
Sure. Families can log on to communitylearningsites.org, and there's a list of all of the locations, all 22-7 locations. There's also a map to make it really easy for parents to understand and know which location is most convenient for their home or work. So that's communitylearningsites.org.
And I'm going to tell you, when I clicked on it for my research and I saw where every place was, I just did like this. See, that's what I'm talking about. I mean, I did. I mean, because the bottom line is, a lot of times when you talk about these kinds of programs aren't in our community. They just aren't. And the resources aren't in our community.
Yeah.
And so we suffer. But here, there's really no excuse now for folks to be able to get what they need and the necessary tools that are available. So when I take a look at the students, let's talk about the students. Any stories about how the students are responding and reacting to these community learning sites? Because I know when my students, I'll share this with you. The funniest thing for me was, Mr. Lamont, I can't wait to be out of school. Just driving me crazy. And then the pandemic hit. They had to be on computers and virtual learning. Man, I can't wait to get back to school. I can't wait, so it's really crazy how it is right now. But I know the students probably are saying, hey, this is a relief for me because now I have an opportunity to have one-on-one in-person learning. And that's a big deal.
Well, not only that, Tony, I would also say, students get a chance to see other students.
Yeah.
That interaction piece, it plays a big role in K-12 education, just being able to interact with your peers. And I think the community learning sites, we offer that opportunity, obviously within social distancing guidelines, but at least I'm around another kid. I can, crack a joke or whatever the case is to make me feel like, some of these households are single parent households. So it's just me and my child there, and they have no interaction with other children. So I think that goes a long way in just supporting that social emotional learning that's very, very paramount in the child's education.
Have you noticed any improvement so far?
I have. I mean, they're just happy to be there. They're just happy to be in that environment and be able to interact and learn and just be engaged with other people. And I think that that's something we forget about when we're thinking about that social isolation that some adults endure. Children are enduring the same thing, and they need that.
Right.
There was
my second grader. Sorry. I was going to tell you a little bit about my second grader loves it. He's like, oh, mommy, we going to that place. I get to go and hang out and they have good snacks and we do all of these things. Now, my seventh grader is like, mommy, I have to go back. I'm like, yes, you have to go back because I need to work and I have stuff to do. So you need to be there. But for the most part, he just started with that. But for the most part, they really enjoy it. They really like it. And I like the piece of they getting engaged with other students. It's really small and intimate and they have a good time.
There was actually one parent who I spoke with, several weeks ago. Her child was very quiet and, in the traditional school setting, very quiet and reserved, kind of, very afraid to ask questions. And so she just talked about how more active the child is. And, it's because of the small learning environment. And her child also seems to be more confident in her learning, unafraid to ask questions. And so the social aspect that Kareema and Morrise, mentioned is so important, because I think, but it goes beyond student to student. I think it gives students
Right.
who are, introverted, the confidence to, ask questions that they may not ask in a traditional setting. So it's just been really great. And I think some more feedback that we heard was that because it is such a small setting and that individualized personal attention, parents are noticing a higher interest, in school from their children, just in general. Like they're more excited about learning, which is pretty cool.
Mm-hmm. Now, the one thing that I'd like for someone to speak about is the opportunity for parents to bring children to the site when they're able to. So talk about that a little bit, because I know the hours vary from place to place, site to site. But the bottom line is this is an opportunity. As Treasurer mentioned, I mean, if you're an educator, your school is open and you have children that are maybe doing hybrid learning, but now you have an opportunity, whether you're hybrid or not, to still go at a different time. So anybody want to expound on, the opportunity for the parents to take advantage of that?
So I would say, for me, so my kids' school start at 9. They're at Cold Spring Elementary, and so they have to be at the learning site by 9:30. They typically send us something the night before that we have to fill out and make sure there are no COVID symptoms, or otherwise they can't come. And then they stay there until 5, and so they're there most of the day. I have enough time. I'm able to pick them up, and they have a good time.
That's great. When I think about this too, and here's something that we often don't think about when it comes to a lot of communities, but we have to think about it when it comes to the Black and Brown communities. And I always think of Maslow's hierarchy, in where that they have to be comfortable, they have to feel safe.
Right.
All those things have to be a part before we can even educate them, before we can even touch their minds and get them involved. And these community learning centers, it looks like it speaks directly to that, because it addresses this safety issue and this community issue and puts them in a place where they feel safe. So now they can stand up and do the right thing and do the things they need to do. So talk about that, because I know we talked about, the food and some of the other things, but talk about some of the other aspects of coming together in this community center.
Tony, I think you raised an excellent point that I wanted to touch on, and that is, so let's just be honest. Not all homes are safe havens, right? And so a lot of our babies go to school, and it's a safe haven for them. They can be a child, they can be nourished and fed, both socially, emotionally, etc. But there's a lot of stressors at home.
Right.
And so being able to go to a community learning site and sense and feel those same emotions, that same joy, that same relief is huge and is paramount for our babies to succeed during this very challenging and difficult time. It's critical. So yeah, I too, agree that these community learning sites, they're awesome. It's a game changer for our babies and our families. Absolutely.
Anybody else?
Absolutely. Just to piggyback off of what Mr. Johnson said, it is it's just crucial. Like before you can even begin to introduce curriculum, they have to be and they have to feel safe. And so bringing my kids into the classroom, even though sometimes don't get me wrong, I wake up and I am nervous. I don't want to get sick and I don't want to get anyone else sick. And I want them to be safe. However, there's just so much that is structured. There's so much that is predictable, which creates a safe space for students to be an active learner and receive information. But teaching resiliency is part of my job, regardless of whether or not it's in that description. being able to teach a child how to be resilient and push through sometimes when they're not feeling so great or when the environment is not conducive to their learning is part of being a good teacher. It's part of being a youth worker, and also just being able to affirm them when I am virtual, when we are online, understanding or making the work not so paper desk. So if there's something that I can do to get them off the computer and then they just have to bring it back and take a picture or show me, then that's the opportunity I'm going to take to do that as well. Just to be very innovative with how we're instructing them at this point in time.
I want to make sure everybody knows that we are talking about closing the e-learning education gap with the community learning sites. You can go to communitylearningsites.org and find out where 27 learning sites are in the community that can help address some of the deficiencies that are going on when it comes to learning in our community, and assets are available across the board. This is amazing, and the Mind Trust has to be applauded for all the things that they've done and the assistance that they've made. Let me ask this question real quick. Let me see. Can you speak to how the pandemic could add trauma to families and children? And who wants to take that? Kareema, if you want to take that.
So I'm leaning in closer. So I'm a trauma counselor and I work with families every day who've had some type of trauma related to sexual abuse, domestic violence, any type of trauma. And so it definitely hasn't helped. I think it's just added a extra layer to already the things that they are struggling with. I see kids every day who deal with anxiety and having problems sleeping, and not being able to focus. So you just add all of those in to the layer of, okay, they may have already been struggling in school. And so now it's a pandemic and now I'm not able to sleep and now I can't focus. And so if you were already struggling, you may be struggling more. And then maybe my parent isn't at home to help me during the day with school and I'm at home with a couple of siblings. I mean, I think it's just really has been a hindrance. It has really been stressful for families. And in school I like that safe place of like, okay, I can talk to my teacher or, someone else at the school who can help me and knows what's going on. And so then if you're at home, it makes it so much more difficult. I would say I've noticed the most is anxiety has increased a lot, and not just with kids, a lot of parents too, just with everybody. Everybody is just super anxious and are struggling a lot.
Mm-hmm. Thank you for that. Because I asked that question because the one thing that is paramount in our community is we have this thing that we do that it's called don't let nobody know what's happening in the house. And so when it comes to trauma, when it comes to those challenges, we don't talk about it. So
yes.
this addresses that in the context of now we have something on top of what's going on, the educational aspect. But I mean, these community learning centers are an opportunity to really kind of let, and forgive me for putting it this way, but kind of let loose and feel comfortable. That village aspect is there. Right. So it's got to make people feel better. Let's what do we need to say to those families about the trauma aspect? Because in our community, we don't, I'm just going to speak out. I get therapy. I get it. I know I need it. So, but we don't get therapy. We don't get the help we need. We don't have the conversations, or we have the conversations with people that have the same problems that we have. So the solutions are terrible solutions.
Right.
So what suggestions, what do we need to do to make sure that in this traumatic situation, that as families, as a community, we can work together and become a village? And I mean, because these learning sites are a village. So what do we need to do to address that aspect of the trauma that we're facing?
That's interesting. You said that about, we don't go to counseling. We're not telling anybody our business. And sometimes I have kids that definitely do that. I think what makes it so good at my job is that we don't have to talk about those tough things that happen. So we just work on the trauma symptoms, and we try to work on improving those and help them get better. And so if they don't want to tell me all of the things that go on in their house, they don't have to. We make it very easy over here. But most of the time they tell me what's the stuff that's going on. The parents think that they don't, but they tell me everything that goes on in the house and what's going on. But I think we need to just have that conversation of like, this is stressful. You know, this is how I deal with anxiety, or this is how I know when I am getting anxious. And, you know, these are some things that I do that help me. And these are some things that can help you. I think we just have to really just have those conversations. And they're difficult conversations, because if you don't know what makes you anxious and you don't know how your body responds to stress, or you don't pay attention to it, then how can you talk to your kid about it? But, you know, it starts with just having those conversations and not being afraid to talk to your kids about, like, I am worried. You know, you have to go into details and tell them all of the things that you're worried about. But like, yes, this does make me worried. I'm worried about your safety. And sometimes I stress out about it. And so these are some things that I do. I do deep breathing, or I watch TV, or, you know, I go for a walk, or I exercise. And so, you know, let's come up with some things we can do together as a family to help us deal with stress.
Mm-hmm.
Tony, if I could I jump in on that? Is that possible?
Oh, absolutely, Ontay. Go ahead.
I was reading, it was a report earlier during the pandemic, and I was talking about how children, because they're not in school, the calls to abuse lines, those calls are down, but we know that the abuse is up. So they're not in school, they can't talk to an administrator, they can't talk to a teacher or a peer, and so they're at home with their abusers in some instances. And so, again, another reason that community learning sites are a game changer for our babies, for our families. But I just wanted to point that out, because that's critical on what Ms. Boykins shared.
Yeah. I think one of the things, just to piggyback off of Ontay, one of the initial concerns I had when we were kind of socializing this idea, this concept with our team, was the safety of students, even before their education level, because I knew that, you know, either parents were going to have to leave their students home alone. And, you know, if you live in an apartment complex, or even, you know, in a traditional neighborhood, people know your routines, and they know you usually get in that car at, you know, a certain time of day, and your children are going to school. And so I was really concerned about the safety of children, like being home alone, because that's just the reality. If it wasn't for these community learning sites, many children would be at home alone, to Ontay's point. And because we've only been able to reach 900 students, which is tremendous, and more than any other entity, you know, here in the city, is, you know, we're doing more than any other entity in the city that's free. It's still not enough, you know, but the concern, the safety of children is so imperative. And I think that's the urgency I felt even before, like, the academic success. I wanted to make sure that kids were safe and fed, because that's another issue. A lot of children go to school and they don't eat until they go to school. And sometimes the only meals they get are the meals they get at school, which is why it was so important for us to partner with Second Helpings to ensure that each community learning site could provide food.
And that is truly a big deal. I mean, as I've seen that, I've seen the struggle, and as an educator, knowing that, I mean, how can you teach a young person who's hungry? It's hard to get past that hunger. It's hard to give them a lesson or give them an assignment when all they can think about is what I'm going to eat next. I mean, I have students that will come in and go, you know, Mr. Lamont, can I go to a different lunch? And I know what that means. It means that they haven't eaten, you know, that kind of thing. I don't have that power, but nevertheless, I'll give that call, and we keep, and I'm sure the educators do this, we keep snacks at the desk. We have things available because we want to make sure that we address that. Shannon, let me ask you this question, because with the locations of these community learning centers, it's really important that the folks that are volunteering and working in these centers represent and look like the community that they're in, isn't it?
Yeah, it's incredibly important. So Mind Trust, one of our core values is equity, and we, you know, believe in that deeply. And so, like, as a team internally, we exercise racial equity, and anything we do in the community, we really strive for that. And so it's very important for us to have facilitators who look like the children they serve. And we also wanted to make sure that these facilitators were good people and safe folks. So we vetted all of our facilitators. We covered the cost of the background checks and everything, just to ensure that the students in the community were being entrusted to people who are responsible, loving, and who look like them.
So make sure if you have any questions, go to communitylearningsites.org, get the information, which is very important, so that you can find out where these 27 sites are. And as you just heard Shannon tell you, these are folks that have been vetted. These are folks that are good for your children and are good for the community. I'm just sitting here, I'm excited. I'm excited in the context, and I'm excited at one point, and I'm disappointed in another. Mind Trust has done a wonderful job of reaching 900, but we need to make sure everybody knows this, so that, I mean, I want you to have 100 sites. That would be great, because we don't know when this, I mean, even though they have, the vaccines and everything, we don't know when this is going to stop.
Right.
We don't have a clue. And so, and I know I saw a couple of sites. I know there's spaces on a lot of the sites, but a few of the sites don't have any more capacity at this point, do they?
Exactly. Yeah. We've reached capacity at some of the sites. We're hoping we can secure additional funding. We're very proud of the fact that in less than 3 months, we've invested nearly $500,000 into these sites, which is tremendous. The Mind Trust, again, is all about equity. So we don't just talk about it. We make sure that we live it and we do it. It's an action word for us. And so anything that we do, we're wanting to invest directly into the community. So to have, raise funds in excess, just under $500,000 is tremendous. But the need is still there. There are still, thousands of children who still need to be served. So hopefully, if people feel inclined, they can certainly donate to a community learning site. And if you go to communitylearningsite.org, there's a donate button. We certainly encourage individual donations. No amount is too small. We understand that not everyone, has disposable income. So $5 here, $10 there, that goes a long way. The average cost for students is about $50 per day. And so even, if you could just someone can give $50 is great. But we're hoping that we'll, secure additional funding to extend our sites beyond January 15th. Because as you mentioned, Tony, we don't know when this pandemic will end, and it's likely to extend beyond January, even with the vaccine kind of rolling out slowly.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I'm glad you gave the information for them to make sure, and we want to ask as many people as possibly can to donate and give what they can, because it will make a tremendous difference. Okay, so I gotta get in the personal side of this now. So y'all let the feelings out. Okay. How does it feel when you walk in these places and you see these young people with a place to be? You see the interaction going on. You see them actually doing something that's encouraging. How does it make you feel? I mean, I know educators and parents, and they always feel good about, but when you walk into a place and that place was put in place to make sure that these young people are going to benefit, how does it really make you feel?
Well, I can just attest to the fact, as educators, we are genuinely concerned about the well-being of our students. So to walk in a place and see them there, to Kareema's point, it kind of brings down that level of anxiety of wondering how they're doing. So now I could see you there. I could interact with you. I can also, have a moment of just like normalcy, that I'm here to educate. And I think that goes a long way. And that's just it's a great feeling.
Anybody else? Go ahead.
It just makes me feel. Go ahead, Kareema. Go ahead. No, you go.
No, I was going to say, I was so excited when I found out about this. So, I love to write notes. And so I wrote a note to the Mind Trust, and I just addressed it, to Mind Trust. I didn't know who was going to get this note, but I was just really honored and excited. I was like, yes, they are doing something in the community. This is nice. I tell all of my families at work about it. So it's really exciting. I would say that I'm like super excited. I mean, it doesn't take much to get me excited anyway, but I mean, I think it's wonderful.
That's great. Go ahead, Shannon.
I feel certainly excited, but there's a sense of warmth. I feel not just for the students and the educators and the facilitators who are there every day, but also for the way that the community has kind of wrapped its arms around this initiative. For so long, and unfortunately, many Black and brown children feel like their lives aren't valued. They don't deserve to be invested in. No one cares about them. So the fact that, we have community partners who've heard about these community learning sites and say, how can I help? I want to do something, and have donated items or donated their time, or, it's just been such an outpouring of support from the greater community. It just shows you how, the village really can come around and wrap its arms around children. I think that makes me feel good. Our community, unfortunately, can be kind of segmented at times and a bit compartmentalized. So I just really appreciate how everyone is kind of joining forces to do what's best for children, specifically Black and brown children, because we don't see that enough.
Treasure?
Yes, I absolutely. So my school's still open, so I teach in my school, but when I can't see my kids, I just feel there's just like this anxiety, right? So there's an anxiety on the behalf of the teachers also, where I can't see them. I don't know if they're okay. They're not logging on. They're not doing assignments. But then when they walk through those doors and I can make sure that they have lunch or make sure that they are understanding the content, and sure that they're feeling okay, because we do check-ins every single day. And then on top of that, affirm them. There is just, I don't know. I think it's a piece that I think that's the word for it. There's a piece that kind of just washes over that whole situation, that family, that child, everything.
Ontay, what do you have to say?
Yeah, man, to Shannon's point, when we can bring equity to Black and brown children, when we can let them know, the families, the parents, the grandmas, G-mom, Big Mom, G-dad, and all of the others that are serving in these roles during this critical time, to let them know that we got your back. You matter. We're here with you. We see you. We hear you. We want to celebrate you during this moment. I know it's challenging, but we're going to get through this together. And so being able to see that is awesome. And we know that better days are coming. We may be in the fire now, we're in the storm now, but better days are coming.
That's amazing. And thank you all for sharing that. Any final thoughts?
I'd like to thank Radio One for allowing us, on your platform and to do this. I'm a huge fan of Radio One and you, Tony, and all the work you've done for years in the community and in schools now. So I salute you and Radio One for everything you're doing. Thank you for this opportunity.
Oh, thank you.
I just want to echo what Shannon was saying, and just bringing this, really to the forefront to the listeners, just letting them know that there's still opportunities, and we need more support to continue this, this resource to be provided to our community. So, thank you for that.
Absolutely. And I think I'll finish it out this way. What the Mind Trust has done and what all of you are doing is amazing. And it speaks to the fact that we have no excuse now, because people have said that the resources weren't made available to us and we weren't able to get things done and da, 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 da. That's not the case now. There are 27 sites that are available that will assist, help, encourage, and grow young people in our community, and really the community overall and the village overall.
Right.
So all you need to do right now is take advantage. Go to communitylearningsites.org, find out where those sites are, and take advantage of these resources. I know it's tough. It's really hard, but now there's a place where you can go that can assist in the situation. So the best way to look at it is education is love. And I got to tell you that you are showing a great deal of love. And I just want to thank Mind Trust and just thank you for what you've done, and all of you for being a part of this wonderful conversation in this panel.
Thank you.
Thank you.
We'll see y'all next time.